You already know this story. The men grab their spears and head out to hunt. Big, dangerous, heroic. They chase down a mammoth, drag it home, and the whole tribe eats because of them. Meanwhile, the women stay behind, tending the fire, watching the kids, picking a few berries near the cave, waiting for the men to come back and save everyone. That's the picture. It's in every textbook, every museum diorama, every cartoon about cavemen. There's just one problem. It's almost completely wrong. The truth about what ancient women were actually doing is so different from what you were taught that anthropologists have spent the last few years basically rewriting the entire story. And when you find out what they were really doing and how much of the tribe's survival actually depended on them, you're never going to look at that museum diorama the same way again. Let's start with the single most important fact. The one that breaks the whole Man the Hunter story in one move. In most foraging societies, the hunt, the big, dramatic, spear-throwing hunt, provided only a fraction of the food. The majority of the calories, in many groups up to 80%, came from gathering, and gathering was, overwhelmingly, done by women. Now stop and think about what that actually means. We've been told this story where men are the providers and women are the support staff. But if 80% of the food a tribe eats comes from gathering, and women are doing most of the gathering, then women weren't the support staff. They were the main food supply. The men were out hunting, yes. And sometimes they came back with a huge kill, and everyone celebrated. But hunting is unreliable. You can chase an animal all day and come home with nothing. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers found that on most days, the hunt failed. You know what didn't fail? The women coming back with roots, nuts, fruit, seeds, tubers, honey, eggs, small game, fish, and shellfish, day after day, reliably. The food that actually kept everyone alive between the rare big kills. One anthropologist put it bluntly: the men were conscientious but not particularly successful hunters. They brought home about 20% of the calories. The women brought home the rest. So the next time you picture a hungry tribe waiting desperately for the hunters to return, flip it. The hunters were often the ones coming back empty-handed, hoping the women had food. Now here's where people make a mistake. They hear gathering and they picture something gentle, a peaceful stroll, picking a few berries, easy work. That is not what gathering was. Gathering was a deeply skilled, physically demanding, knowledge-intensive job that took a lifetime to master. Think about what you actually need to know. You need to identify hundreds of different plants. Which ones are food? Which ones are medicine? Which ones look almost identical to the food but will kill you in an afternoon? You need to know the seasons, when each plant fruits, where it grows, how to find it again next year, how deep to dig for a root that's completely invisible from the surface. You need to know how to process it. Many wild foods are toxic raw and need to be soaked, ground, leached, fermented, or cooked in specific ways before they're safe. Get it wrong, and people die. This was a vast library of knowledge, held in people's heads, passed down across generations, and it was largely held by women. And it wasn't gentle. Gathering meant walking enormous distances, often carrying a child the entire way. It meant digging hard ground with simple tools. It meant hauling heavy loads of food back to camp on your back. Researchers who studied modern foraging women found they were walking miles every single day, carrying serious weight, while also nursing and minding children. The woman picking berries by the cave image isn't just wrong, it's almost insulting to how hard the actual work was. These women were the tribe's botanists, pharmacists, and primary food producers, all at once. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And I want to be careful and honest with you because this part is genuinely debated by scientists right now. For a long time, the assumption was simple. Men hunted, women didn't. Full stop. Then, recently, that assumption got challenged hard. In 2023, a study looked across a huge range of foraging societies and found something startling. Women weren't just occasionally hunting. The researchers reported evidence of women hunting in 79% of the societies they examined. Sometimes small game, sometimes large, dangerous animals, sometimes leading the hunt themselves. Archaeologists also started re-examining ancient burials. They found graves with hunting weapons buried alongside the body, and for decades they'd automatically assume those bodies were male. When they actually checked the bones, some of them were women. Buried with their hunting tools, animals like the hunters they were. Now, and this matters, other scientists pushed back. They argued the 79% number was too high, that the study counted things too loosely, and that in most societies, women still hunted far less often than men. Their estimate was closer to 7% as a regular activity. So who's right? Probably somewhere in between. And that in between is still revolutionary, because even the skeptics agree on the core point. The idea that women never hunted, that they couldn't hunt, that biology made it impossible, that's just false. Women hunted in many places throughout human history. The strict wall between male hunter and female gatherer was never as solid as we were taught. It wasn't a law of nature. It was a flexible arrangement that changed from place to place and time to time. But wait, weren't women just physically incapable? Smaller, weaker, slowed down by pregnancy? This is the part that surprises people most. In some ways, the female body is actually better suited to one of the most important kinds of hunting humans ever did. Humans aren't fast. We can't outrun a deer in a sprint. What we can do is something almost no other predator can. We can run an animal to death over hours. It's called persistence hunting. You don't catch the animal. You follow it relentlessly until it overheats and collapses from exhaustion. And persistence hunting isn't about explosive speed or raw strength. It's about endurance, stamina, the ability to keep going and going and going. Here's the thing. Physiologically, women's bodies tend to be extremely well adapted for exactly that. Estrogen plays a role in fat metabolism and muscle fatigue resistance. In endurance events, the performance gap between men and women shrinks dramatically the longer and harder the challenge gets. The deep assumption that women's bodies made them unfit for the hunt has it backwards. For the type of hunting that may have mattered most in human evolution, the long, grinding endurance chase, the female body wasn't a disadvantage at all. The too weak to hunt story doesn't survive contact with actual physiology. Now let's put the children back into the picture, because this is where the old story gets it most backward. The old version treats childcare as the thing that kept women out of real work, as if minding kids was a side activity that made you irrelevant to survival. Flip that completely. In a hunter-gatherer band, raising the next generation wasn't a distraction from survival, it was survival. A tribe that didn't successfully raise children simply ceased to exist within one generation. And childcare wasn't one woman alone in a cave. It was a shared communal system. Older children watched younger ones. Grandmothers, and this is huge, played a massive role. There's an actual scientific idea about this called the grandmother hypothesis. It points out that human females are unusual in the animal kingdom for living long past their reproductive years. Why would evolution keep grandmothers around? Because a grandmother who gathered food and helped raise her grandchildren dramatically improved their odds of surviving. Grandmothers may have been so valuable to group survival that they helped shape human longevity itself. So the women weren't on the sidelines of the tribe. They were the structure of it, the food supply, the knowledge base, the medical system, the childcare network, the thread of continuity that carried culture and survival from one generation to the next. The men hunted. It mattered. Nobody's erasing that. But the idea that the tribe revolved around the hunter coming home, that everything depended on the man with the spear, is a story we told ourselves much, much later. So, what were ancient women actually doing while the men hunted? They were producing most of the food the tribe ate. They were carrying a lifetime of botanical and medical knowledge that kept everyone alive. They were walking miles, digging, hauling, processing, doing physically brutal work, often with a child on their back. Some of them were hunting too, with weapons for real game, buried as hunters when they died. And they were raising and protecting the next generation, which is the only reason any tribe survived long enough to have a next generation at all. The cave woman waiting by the fire for a man to bring home dinner, she was never real. The real ancient woman was out there every single day doing the quiet, relentless, skilled work that the entire species was actually built on. We just spent about 100 years forgetting to mention it. Now you won't.